You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA. You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the fabulous Peltoncast. I'm your co-host Kevin Pelton,
and I'm Tristan Carcino.
And it is time for our annual Year in Music podcast, the long-awaited Year in Music podcast, the start of our year in review festivities. Always a favorite of mine, and I know yours as well, is someone who works in the music industry.
Actually, that makes it my least favorite. Least favorite podcast of the year. Not gonna lie to you, except when you have your monologues about hydroplanes. But this is my chance to have and when thinking about the year in music in 2023, I think there are some subjects that we should get to and specific topics that we should get to as kind of overarching ideas that happen in music. And then we'll also go through your top 10 songs of the year, me with 10 kind of underground type songs, emerging type artists of 2023 that came out. But, I think there was a lot of similarities in 2023 to music in 2022. TikTok was still...
what are the odds?
But this is a transitional time period in a lot of ways. TikTok was still the primary source of marketing and discovery for music across the world. It's something that the TikTok trend, even though people are not, in their homes because of the pandemic, TikTok is still very powerful. And musically speaking, it's the number one marketing tool for basically any record label, any major label there is. But I do think there are some encouragements about that as well. Not necessarily that discovering music through TikTok is bad, but I do think that there's a little bit of a questionable nature of people becoming fans of 30-second to a minute snippets of songs. Right. But I think the thing to me that was most exciting about 2023, as opposed to years in the past, was there was kind of a reemergence of indie music in general, and then also rock bands in particular, and how that is transformed, and people kind of post TikTok resorting back to wanting something that's a little bit more authentic, a little bit more traditional album campaign of touring, of people buying records in full, not just individual songs, press, things like that. There are artists who blew up in 2023, maybe not in the virality way, but artists who got very, very large in a much more traditional sense. And some of that is paired with TikTok and some of it isn't. But it's interesting to me that I do feel like in 2023, there is now a chance to be a huge artist without the support of TikTok. And that's something that wasn't necessarily the case a couple of years ago. But then also, I do think we're still coming out a bit of pandemic times. This was basically the first year where there was full open touring. A handful of dates were canceled because of COVID, but 2023 was a year that you didn't expect a show that you bought a ticket for to be canceled, or go in with that expectation that there was a good chance that it would be. Pretty much the entire year, almost every single festival that was scheduled played out. Almost every single tour that was scheduled played out. There weren't those cancellations that we saw even in 2022 for a part of it, where the year really opened up kind of midway through 2022 fully. And so I think we're seeing part of that in the way that the rest of the world is. We are definitely in a post-COVID world, and I think people are probably even underestimating how much it has affected America and the United States and some of the transition that's going on in the world. But musically,
are those speaking, different places, America and the United States?
Sorry, the United States and the rest of the world. But I think one of the things that people are looking for in this post-pandemic world was there was angst for a long time. Pop punk came back, right? We had kind of the early 2000s nostalgia. I think we're tweaking a little bit later in the nostalgia period, and not to sound old.
You were there for the 20th anniversary tour of Give Up and Transatlanticism. I was, good sir, and there was so much early 2000s nostalgia at that one.
That's exactly what I'm saying, though. It is the nostalgia has moved a couple of years later. It's not the early 2000s pop punk, late 90s pop punk. We've now, as time has passed, we're at that 20-year period of the first generation of really big indie rock. And that's kind of where we've cycled around to nostalgia-wise. MGMT is back. A lot of those bands are bigger than they've ever been right now. Those kind of early 2000s first generation of, it wasn't college rock anymore, it was indie rock, right? It was that time period that bands were massive. And that's kind of what the Postal Service and Death Cab were capitalizing on with this massive tour that they also announced dates for in 2024 as well. So that's kind of the period nostalgia-wise that we're at, and it's also reflecting new music. But I do think the post-COVID piece of it is, I think as a society, I think people were looking for something a little bit more comforting coming out of the pandemic, and also their view of Americana. And, it's totally radically different views of what Americana means in 2023. But I do think it's a little bit of a different, it's just a slightly change of pace for the view that people are looking for. It's not quite unabashed pop music. It's not quite angst. I think Americana to me is the number one thing that you can the thread that you can point everything back to. Not Americana as a genre, Americana as really establishing ourselves as the arts and the culture of the United States, and the view of what that looks like in 2023, because it's radically different than it's ever been. But I don't think we could start a 2023 year in music podcast without talking about Taylor Swift.
Yeah, which I think also fits into something else post-pandemic, which is just this pent-up demand for live music, and the fact that the concert industry at the highest levels is booming even more than it was pre-pandemic, where, I remember when Beyonce came to Seattle a few years ago. This is obviously a different tour, the Renaissance tour. Uh, she came to Seattle in like 2016, I want to say. And it was like very easy to get tickets last minute. I don't think it was sold out at Lumen Field. And the difference between that and what the Renaissance tour is now, and the Eras tour, obviously to an entire different level, and even both of those tours to bringing back the concert movie as an in-movie theater experience, it's just been a wild year. And yeah, I mean, even though Taylor Swift, for the most part, did not release new music in 2023.
I mean, this is the tour.
Yes, granted, it's going back to the 2022 album, but still dominated music. Like, Taylor Swift was always a big star, but there are levels to this shit, and she reached an incredible new level this year.
I think there's a chance that Taylor Swift is the biggest pop artist right now. This summer was the biggest year for a pop artist in the history of the world. And I say that not necessarily that she was the biggest pop artist in the world, because there was so much monoculture when previous artists were releasing music. But when you look at where culture has gone and how diverse culture is and music culture is.
So you're saying we need to era adjust this, as if we're like talking about the dead ball era versus the 90s home run explosion.
Exactly. So to be as big as Taylor Swift was, touring wise, especially in 2023, I think it was the biggest year in music ever.
Yeah, I mean, it was like hard to. Taylor Swift took over the NFL, which was an unlikely development that I did not see at the beginning of 2023. It was just impossible to go anywhere without Taylor Swift, and I certainly don't mean that as a criticism. And within my own life, this certainly became the case in a much bigger way. Like, Taylor Swift was probably the artist that I listened to the most in 2023.
Wild. So I have a theory about Taylor Swift and this year, because it was kind of a perfect storm of things hitting in favor of Taylor Swift in the year 2023. So basically, this Eras tour, right, spanning her entire career, Taylor Swift is the Harry Potter of music. So there were all these kids who were in like 3rd, 4th grade or whatever when Harry Potter came out, right? They were young and they were reading it. And Harry Potter aged basically as they aged, maybe slightly older, a little bit younger than us, this generation of kids. But so
a lot younger than us.
They aged with Harry Potter and with the books. And by the time you got to Volume 7, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, right? Harry Potter was the biggest book in the entire world, and in a similar way may have been the biggest book of all time at that point, because those kids who had grown up with it had just kind of been along the ride the entire time with Harry Potter, and it was such a big deal for them. In the same way that for Taylor Swift, she has been in the pop culture as a notable pop artist since she kind of crossed over from country. For those kids, from when they were young, 3rd, 4th grade, all the way to now when they're in their 20s, in their early 20s, time like that, and they have grown up with her as a central figure in pop music. And the thing that Taylor Swift has done, similar to Harry Potter, is I don't think you would really argue that Taylor Swift is like the best artist during that time period. but she has always been very good and been very consistent. And it's kind of like it has just grown and grown and grown as those kids have aged. And this was the perfect storm of this. I mean, this is it. Like there's almost no way you could argue that Taylor Swift could be more popular. If you were to make an argument that she's going to be less popular after this, it would be easy to do because she's the most popular that she can be. It's kind of only downhill for Taylor Swift from here in that tour. It would be unprecedented territory. She's already in unprecedented territory. But I think the other piece of people were looking for something that was comforting. In the way that Harry Potter was a comforting story, you understood it, you'd grown along with it, right? There's a nostalgia piece, there's a home element to it, right? It's a little piece of, despite Harry Potter not being American, but like Taylor Swift is Americana. And she has been one of these Central American pop stars for this entire time. So we ended up in this place post pandemic that people are looking for something. It's a strange world out there, right? There's a lot going on. There are wars happening in multiple places. But do you know what is safe and comforting? Taylor Swift is safe and comforting by being consistent and always being good. Never being the best, always being good. And all of that led to Taylor Swift in the year 2023. I have a more complicated part of this theory as well that I can't talk about on this podcast, but I do think there was a place that people were looking for something that they really, really just understood completely and felt very, very safe to the masses. And it's safe in Seattle, and it's safe in LA, and it's safe in Chicago, and it's safe in Omaha, and it's safe in Minneapolis. Like this is music that transcends everywhere, and she's from the South, right? This is not, you're not subjected to almost any other piece to think about anything else that people fight about when you listen to Taylor Swift.
I understand what you're saying. I still think safe is a little pejorative.
That's not an insult to Taylor Swift. I'm not saying her music is safe, because in the same way, Harry Potter became darker and darker and darker over time. The kids got older. Taylor Swift got older as well. Like, it's not a criticism of the music. It's that we understand it completely.
I think the part that you're maybe underselling here, and I think there are many of the listener, I can think of some specifically who will dispute you're not the best assertion, but also the variety, because it's not like Harry Potter was a bunch of different styles from book to book, and that's one thing that Taylor Swift has done as part of Revolution is she's her albums explore different genres and different styles along the way, and that's something the Eras Tour highlighted.
I'm going to give that one an okay. I think that is very generous. She's not the toughest or the artiest pop star we have, right? She's not somebody who demands devotion in the way that Lana Del Rey does, right? Where it's almost like you don't feel like you know Taylor Swift, if that makes sense. Taylor Swift feels famous.
Yeah, I don't know that necessarily. I don't necessarily think that makes her music any less personal. Okay. Well, I guess we have different perspectives on this.
But I also think Beyonce was sort of part of that conversation, and I think struggled a little bit as an artist in basically the shadow of Taylor Swift. As Taylor Swift is having the biggest touring year ever, Beyonce could have had the biggest touring year ever.
I mean,
if it weren't for Taylor Swift.
Struggle is like, LeBron is struggling relative to Michael Jordan's 6 championships.
I think that's fair. But it also is like, I was literally in 2 places this summer that Taylor Swift and Beyonce were performing. Granted, this is Chicago and it's a big place. I left Seattle where Taylor Swift is performing and went to Chicago where Beyonce was performing. In Seattle, the only conversation that was happening was about Taylor Swift. That was it. There were not other conversations. In Chicago, Beyonce was a thing that was happening and it was important, but it wasn't the only thing that was happening. It didn't disrupt society in the way that Taylor Swift did. And I can tell you that Beyonce is keenly aware of this information. Beyonce put out a better record than Taylor Swift did last year. But at the same time, Taylor Swift is more famous than Beyonce is in this moment, in the same way that Taylor Swift had the concert film. It's a huge deal. Beyonce had a concert film. It's a deal.
I agree, but also Beyonce wasn't putting out concert films previously in movie theaters. So I do think there's an element of Taylor Swift paving the way for that sort of thing as well. So I think there is, kind of a Drake resistance for Beyonce drafting off of Taylor Swift to some degree in that
Yeah.
regard. All right, anything else on this topic?
I don't think so.
All right, well, the second thing we wanted to talk about was 50 years of hip hop. Why 1973? That's the year that father of hip hop, DJ Kool Herc, began isolating the instrumental portion of records, extending the break, creating the beats over which rap would develop, which therefore makes this the 50th anniversary of hip hop, is the Grammys we'll be celebrating next year.
And we also had a 50 years of hip hop on CBS featuring like Will Smith and Dougie Fresh. And it's really fascinating because I think it comes at a very interesting time for hip hop. And I think basically for the first time, this has been a trend that has been continuing for a handful of years, but for one of the first times since, I don't know what year to put it, 1998, something like that. This is the first time period, because I don't exactly say year, time period, where hip hop was not pop music, if that makes sense. There has not been a really, really famous hip hop artist who has put out their first record since, I can't even really think of who it is right now. Like the most important artist to come out in these last couple of years, Ice Spice probably being the most important one. There has been a little bit of a void in truly large superstar level hip hop artists that have come out. And I do think it's, as a genre, we're on the 50th year, right? But we also are on the 30th year as being the most important genre in the entire world. And I think hip hop is at a pretty transitionary place. And coming out of the pandemic, I think that piece of Americana was not something that hip hop had been rallied around. You talk about concerts being so in demand, but I don't know if you saw that it was trending. Travis Scott's tour that happened this last fall was not in demand in that same way. You had Drake and 21 Savage playing arenas, but not stadiums this summer. They were big shows and they probably could have, but I think it's notable that they didn't in that same way that you have Beyonce and you have Taylor Swift playing Lumen Field, right? And you have Drake and 21 Savage playing 2 nights at Climate Pledge Arena. Like there is a difference between those two things. And maybe they wanted to be a little bit more intimate. Obviously, he did like 7 nights in LA. These are still big shows. But also, Drake has been making music for at least a decade, right? He has been a famous artist for a very long time. And at this point, like Drake songs are not on the radio anymore. There have not been massive, massive hip hop songs.
In Peltoncast time, Best I Ever Had came out in 2009. So yes, well more than a decade.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a long, long time. But that's kind of my point, is like there haven't been truly massive, and this is not to say anything about the genre. There obviously are still exciting artists releasing music within the genre, but I'm talking about on a pop scale. Pop music as it is has changed, but pop music is now the number one genre that there is. I think you can even see it with SNL guests too, musical guests. There's been Ice Spice, right? Which I think is the only hip hop artist who's been on this season. But then you have Noah Kahan, Olivia Rodrigo, Boy Genius, Bad Bunny, like those types of artists who are having a really, really, really big impact currently are not hip hop artists. And to me, the number one way that you can know that hip hop is dead right now is that 50 year anniversary celebration was happening on CBS.
Exactly. I mean, certainly, hip hop, like rock music originally, it was, the rebellion, the opposition. And when this is inevitable in all things, over a long enough time period, the rebels in their youth become the institutions in their older ages. And we've seen rock and, mainstream rock go through this sort of evolution. And it does feel like there are some elements that hip hop is following down the same path.
You also had Andre 3000 putting out a flute album this year, right? And what is the name of the first song on that album?
Is it Hip Hop Is Dead?
No, it was like, I swear I was trying to record a hip hop album.
Oh, okay. I mean, obviously Nas already did that one many years ago, before hip hop was in fact
Nas was wrong. Hip hop was dead for Nas.
You can't be wrong over a long enough timeline if you make a prediction like that.
but it's been interesting to me to see when you look at like today's top hits on Spotify, Mitski is on the cover of that. Tell me that indie rock is not at its like fucking peak. It basically took the popularity of those early 2000s artists and amplified it, right? Some of those artists are so massive right now. We have a Pine Grove TikTok dance in 2023. The world is definitely changing in a way that I think that hip hop hasn't necessarily transformed that much. And it's a little bit more about these smaller pockets, very large, smaller pockets of artists. And there's still kind of at the base level, hip hop is a more popular genre than hip hop is, or than indie rock is. But like the truly, truly massive artists, when you turn on pop radio, if you would have turned on Kiss 106 in 2006, it was all hip hop songs. There wasn't a pop song on there, really. And even the like pop songs were all hip hop influenced pop songs. And that is not the case anymore.
I'm still not totally sure I necessarily recognize the difference between hip hop and pop. I mean, I do think that part of it is that, you know, these elements all get incorporated into pop music, and pop music just becomes whatever is popular. It's not, unlike these other genres, it's not designed by, it's not designated as a certain type of sound. It's just whatever is popular. So, you know, I do think you're underselling that to a degree, but certainly there is an evolution happening.
I I don't even know. I agree with that, but pop music was hip hop. You understand that, right? Like hip hop songs were pop music, and now they're not. There's still truly, truly big hip hop songs and rappers, but they are not pop music. They are not the most popular genre. I was scrolling through today's top hits right now on Spotify, and it's like there's maybe like 4 or 5 hip hop songs on here, and there are a lot of pop songs on here. I mean, Mitski at number 1.
We haven't mentioned SZA at any point, and even though, you know, technically Kill Bill came out in 2022, that should certainly be mentioned. Or excuse me,
I think I
SOS.
think I think I meant to include that as part of Americana though. You have SZA, like her record was her take on Americana. There's a song that sounds like Mazzy Star, one of the biggest songs on it, right? Like it is radically different from what that record could have looked like 15 years ago, or a record that came out on Quality Control could have sounded like, right? Or
Yeah.
sorry, on TD, on TD could have sounded like 15 years ago, or would have sounded like 15 years ago. But like the artists who are truly, truly massive at the moment, Olivia Rodrigo, people like that, SZA. Olivia Rodrigo is not hip hop influenced music necessarily.
No, I think she would say I do recognize a distinction there.
So uh I will be curious to see. I think it'll probably take some sort of very notable artist in the genre, somebody very large doing something that feels a little bit special and new. And I don't think that that artist has come around for a while. Um, and I think that's what it'll take for that to transition and um, for hip hop to be kind of the number one genre again in the way that pop music is right now.
Well, speaking of Americana, the last thing that you in particular wanted to talk about was the rise of country music in
And
2023.
and I think this is on the same piece. This is kind of on the same continuum with hip hop not being as large. When you look at like the Billboard charts every single week, it's like 6 country songs. And there's something about country in the moment, which again, post COVID, I have no idea what the causation is. I don't even dare to speculate. But right now, people are very desperate for the stories to sound slightly different. And I think that's the place that country music hit. And at the same time, I think country music has also been good at incorporating other genres. When you look at somebody like Morgan Wallen, for being one of the biggest country artists in the world, like there are hip hop elements to what he's doing. And you have like rappers who are country artists who look like hip hop artists. Somebody like Jelly Roll being one of the biggest artists in the world. I feel like that genre has taken the outsider mentality that you were talking about. Look, there's still the fucking CMTs or whatever, or the CMAs on CBS, but like that is where the outsider mentality is really coming from, is in country music right now, more so than it is in hip hop music. And it's becoming massive because of it. You know, I think the years that like Luke Bryan had, Morgan Wallen, Jelly Roll, Hardy. They have become more or less the biggest pop artists in the entire world. And I think that's something that was definitely not the case 3 or 4 years ago, where country artists were as big as they are. Even just watching TV and you see the ads for like Lainey Wilson and people like that playing amphitheaters, it is different than it was a couple of years ago, and it has become much more mainstream.
I feel like the other piece we need to talk about in this, I thought that you were gonna go deeper on some of that, but Luke Combs' cover of Fast Car, I think, is a fascinating cultural moment in 2023.
Yep.
That's all you have on that one.
I mean, I don't, it is definitely not lost on me that there's a white artist covering a black artist and having one of the biggest songs of 2023, a white country artist covering a black artist
Yeah.
and having one of the biggest songs of 2023, or the comeback that Morgan Wallen has had, right? It is not lost on me that that's the case and where culture has been on a very large level. And I don't mean any of this, the perspective about hip hop or country music, as positive or negative. It is just an observation about what is going on right now. But that particular song is helps you understand culture post COVID.
Do you want to make the case to me, as you have numerous times in unrecorded podcasts offline, for Zach Bryan?
God, we'll get there.
Oh, okay. Wow, this is gonna be in your top songs.
I mean, every listen needs a number one.
But I thought you went with underground artists. You said earlier that you were gonna.
Some artists are so important. Do you want me to talk about Zach Bryan right now?
I think you should. Yes, this is in this context.
So you remember 2 years ago we were on this podcast, the Year in Review podcast, and I was telling you about what a massive year Turnstile had.
Yes.
Right? And I was like, hardcore has become a mainstream genre. And that was 2 years ago. And guess what? Hardcore is a mainstream genre. The biggest artist.
Turnstile's in Taco Bell ads.
One of the most notable performers. Turnstile was even so much bigger than being in Taco Bell ads. We talked about this. They get played at the Seahawks games, right? Like Turnstile is they are a massive hip hop band. They're a massive hardcore band. They're a massive rock band, right? They're kind of everything, and they're still riding that wave from their last album. But like, Turnstile is at a level. They're probably the biggest American rock band at the moment. Luke Bryan is the new Turnstile. Like, this is, it is wild to me how incredible of a year Zach Bryan had, and how Zach Bryan, in the way that Turnstile, it was like the hip hop kids love them, right? The rock kids love them, hardcore kids love them, skaters love them. Everybody loved Turnstile. Pop fans love them. I was in the fucking pit at Camp Flogna, and there were pop fans, like, they're in a pit for Turnstile. It is a wild thing. Zach Bryan, I first heard about him from the skaters, right? From people who are in hip hop. That is where this came from. This was not country fans who were initially talking about Zach Bryan. And to me, the closest cultural lineage that I could think of for Zach Bryan is Bruce Springsteen. Both the storytelling, even the types of songs that he's recording, it is bonkers. He manages to work with people like Noah Kahan and not sound cheesy. Like, the year that Zach Bryan has had and the music he's released is absurd how good he is. And you just hear his voice and you're like, God damn, dude. Like, how are you able to sound like that? Zach Bryan is so good. I don't mind the state of Oklahoma now.
This is a really big development. We'll have to talk about the public subsidies for the Thunder Snow Arena offline.
As red dirt country music, right? I know the term red dirt country because of Zach Bryan. But also with a Northwest connection, his first full length was recorded at Bear Creek Studios in Woodinville, Washington, with the same person who recorded the Lumineers early on. And you look at the artists that Zach Bryan has worked with, and you couldn't even really necessarily call him a country artist in a lot of ways, right? It's Maggie Rogers, Casey Musgraves, which is like right on that edge, the Lumineers, Bon Iver, Noah Kahan. Like, those are the artists. That's where Zach Bryan sits. It happens to be country music, but to me, it's Americana. It's classic rock. It is post Springsteen. Like even I don't even know exactly what genre you would consider Springsteen, but he's encompassing all of those things in one. It is also wild to see to be so famous as Zach Bryan is, and like you click on Spotify, like the country top hot songs or whatever, and he's like 7 of the top 10. Like Zach Bryan is truly, truly, truly massive in a way that's why I kind of want to include him on the list. Is I think people don't understand just how huge of an artist he is right now, and it's because of that. In this, like Morgan Wallen, the skater kids are not into Morgan Wallen, right? Enum Claw's not going to cover a Morgan Wallen song, but Zach Bryan is respected by everybody. And the year that he had, to me, he's easily the most important artist of 2023, the best and the most important artist of 2023, excluding nobody.
Also, certainly the most played on the playlist at your Thanksgiving.
I mean, he's the only person played on my playlist at Thanksgiving. But I also think he was stationed at on Bainbridge as well.
Oh, interesting.
When he was part of the Navy, I'm pretty sure he was stationed in Bainbridge.
All right. Anything more on the trends in the year in music?
I think that's it.
Okay. Do we want to start with my top 10 songs of the year?
Let's do it.
All right. We start with the honorable mentions. First off, I regret that I didn't get to Kill Bill by SZA last year when it was technically eligible because it came out in like December 2022, just ahead of the Year in Music podcast. But it definitely was like among my 10 favorite songs to listen to in 2023. But look, you got to have strict rules for this list if you're creating top 10 songs of the year.
But that's what I'm saying is there is a pop song that, like Mazzy Star is all I can think of when I listen to that song. And how that happened is it is a shocking thing. I heard it for the first time and I was like, oh my God. It was one of those songs where you're like, they did what now?
I don't know that necessarily is what I got out of it, but okay. Also in my honorable mentions.
That's not Kill Bill. Sorry. That's the Nobody Gets Me You Do song.
Gotcha. Key Shy by Major Lazer, with Major League DJs, and then Meeting the Master by Greta Van Fleet, which I do have to talk about for a second because
you do not have a Greta Van Fleet song in here, do you?
I do. It's quite good.
How did you even listen to it? Like what set of circumstances got you to the place of listening to Greta Van Fleet?
Every once in a while, I'll just listen to the new releases to see what might qualify for my top 10. And like at one point, I did some searching and came across the Greta Van Fleet subreddit where they're all like upset at the idea that people are comparing them to Led Zeppelin.
What?
And it's like I come in with no preconceived notions here. I'm not like trying to fit all the facts to my narrative here. This is a Led Zeppelin song, and it's a good Led Zeppelin song, so I enjoyed it. It's an honorable mention.
It's good on them. I will never listen to that song. I heard that band. I heard somebody. It was Scooter Braun. This is how you know it's fucking bullshit.
Oh, no.
I heard Scooter Braun was the first time I ever heard about that band, and he was like, "Yeah, there's this young band called Greta Van Fleet," and he was like, "They're amazing, like the most unique voice or whatever." And I turned it on and I was like, "This is literally just Led Zeppelin cover music, right? This is the only song worse than Fast Car as covered by Luke Combs. Is that who it is?"
I had this up a second ago.
I think that's what you said. I said Luke Bryan earlier, but it's Luke Combs. But look, if it's not Zach Bryan, I didn't hear it in 2023.
Yeah, it's Luke Combs.
But the only thing worse than Fast Car being covered by Luke Combs is the band Greta Van Fleet. So
also, Luke Bryan, I'm pretty sure, is an SEC head coach.
There we go.
No, I didn't mean that joke. Seriously, that was a joke. It just sounds like the name of an SEC head coach. All right, my number 10 song, as we get into the actual top 10, another song that is notable for how much it sounds like something else. And that's All That's Left of Me Is You by Wolfpack. So forget the new Beatles song, Now and Then, which was fine. This was the best Beatles sound released in 2023, some 53 years after Let It Be. Other people described it as the Beatles crossed with Radiohead, and specifically the Beatles song it sounds like is Sexy Sadie.
Fair enough. I guess I should know. We didn't talk about AI music. I felt like AI music was kind of like the It was like NFTs or something. Like AI music came and went very, very quickly and the excitement around it. But I will say, I was in a conference room with Amazon music executives this summer, and a member of Enumclaw asked them what they were listening to. Not that it was the first thing that was brought up, it was the only thing that was brought up. The only thing they could think of that they were listening to that was new was some sort of AI song that was like a Drake song that sounds like Michael Jackson. And I was just like, what a bleak fucking time. So the Beatles AI song. Also, my favorite thing about that is this is where we're
I
really
don't. Was that actually AI? This is my complaint: is that people use AI to mean things that used to just be a computer program.
yeah.
Like that's not the same thing.
I guess I can kind of agree with that. But like the idea that it's like the last Beatles song, and it's like, well, we already had a last Beatles song. So
I agree with that.
who is to say that this is the last Beatles song?
Fair
There
point.
could be Beatles songs forever. I love the idea that it's like, yeah, 2023, I guess the last Beatles song dropped.
You're saying it's like the Roscoe's Rug Emporium of claims.
Also, remember when the Beatles had a big year a couple of years ago?
I
Jesus
do
Christ.
remember that. It
I
does
do
seem, it
feel
seems like
like
a very long time ago. Yeah.
the Beatles, like their level of fame, that we were listening to Glass Onion in the car earlier today, and right, he's like, I told you about the strawberry fields, and he's like, the walrus was Paul, and I'm like, children, who do you think this is? And like, Luca's pretty well versed on shit, and he was guessing all sorts of crazy stuff. At no point, like the Beatles are definitely gone, not gone, they are fading quickly from consciousness, especially for young people. There was a moment there where it came back, but like 60s music is fading very, very quickly.
All right, in my number 9 spot.
You probably have a new album from a 60s artist on your list.
Not quite that far back.
You know, there's new Rolling Stones.
The Stones put out some great stuff. Look, in my number 9 spot, I have Dance the Night by Dua Lipa, which was a well-constructed pop song from the Barbie soundtrack that was used perfectly in the movie and in the trailer and all the marketing around Barbie. It did exactly what it needed to do. All right, number 8. I did tell you I had in my personal favorite genre. A band that you have not listened to in years puts out an album, and I somehow listened to a song and put it in my top 10. And in this case, a band that I didn't even like really care for when they were actually big, the Libertines.
Wow, the Libertines. That is a wild one.
Who
Pete
put out
Doherty?
their first album since 2015. And I had the song Run, Run, Run at number 8 with it's classic pop punk style. And I especially love the line, he can eat more chicken than anyone in the land.
Is it still Pete Doherty and Carl Barat?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
today I learned that this was still a band.
They've actually still been a band for a long period of time, but they had not put out new music since 2015.
This is like NME, like reading NME in the library favorite band. They were the most important band of 2002 from England. I'm not even joking. They were
I know. Yeah. I'm well
it
aware.
it was like John and Paul, like Liam and Noel Gallagher, Pete Doherty and Carl Barat. That was like the level of Libertines fandom. What was the song called? Like Up the Something Pole, right?
I don't know. I wasn't there for that. I wasn't in the library with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I was listening to in 2002,
Up
but
the Bracket.
not
That
that.
was, man. Yeah, definitely not the Libertines. Wow, I don't even. How did you find that?
I think that may have appeared in my what's the one where Release Radar? I think that may have popped in there somehow, and Spotify knew on that one, I guess. I don't know.
I'm impressed.
All right, number 7, not
I
is
was gonna guess the Killers or something. I went way too mainstream.
too mainstream, yes. Number 7, not as far released from their prime, but not in this genre. The Nationals' latest album, number 7, Your Mind Is Not Your Own, which features Phoebe Bridgers, not her last appearance on this list. Spoiler alert.
I figured.
I didn't like this National album, the first 2 pages of Frankenstein, as much as their past ones, but this particular song did stand out to me. All right, at number 6, So You Are Tired by Sufjan Stevens. Javelin, perhaps the most emotional Sufjan album, and that's saying something. It was dedicated to and about the passing of his longtime partner Evans Richardson, and this was the kind of lead song off of that, as well as my favorite. Did you listen to this at all?
I haven't.
In classic, you not listening to new music fashion.
And like I told you what I've heard.
Number 5 for me.
I think I would like the Sufjan album. I'm
of
sure.
course. Yeah. Number 5 for me. Making the Bed from Olivia Rodrigo.
Making the Bed is
Yeah,
the
there was,
one. Wow.
there was no question there would be a representative from Guts, and I strongly considered Bad Idea right, but Making the Bed feels a little more personal and a little less polished than the biggest single off of that album.
You think Bad Idea Right was the biggest single? I'm not sure about that.
It was at least the first single, wasn't it?
No, Vampire was the first single, and I think probably
was it?
also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I thought this album was great though. Like,
of course, everyone thinks this album was great.
But the pressure that was on Olivia Rodrigo to release an excellent album after the debut, it was very high. And then Vampire came out, and I was like, she fucking nailed it. Like, goddamn. But having the entire record all the way through, to me, All American Bitch was like, that was the number one song. When she played that on SNL, I felt like that
was a great choice for SNL.
It was funny seeing, I think it was a few weeks in a row, where it's like Ice Spice, Noah Kahan, and Olivia Rodrigo. And I was on the flight back from Baltimore. I watched
Ice Spice was the first episode, so they were not in a row.
I watched both the Noah Kahan and then the Olivia Rodrigo SNL performances, which a lot of times I don't even watch the musical performance. I'm just like, I'm good. I get it. And the seeing back to back, like Noah Kahan versus what Olivia Rodrigo did, was just wild how different they were, and how much of a performer Olivia Rodrigo is. It was almost like she couldn't even focus on singing because she was performing so much during All American Bitch. But it was like, this is a fucking show right now. I was like, I like these Noah Kahan songs or whatever, but like, he did the Dial Drunk song with Post Malone, which, by the way, country artist now, did the Dial Drunk song with Post Malone. And it was
Post Malone's going to chase whatever's hot.
I don't know if that's exactly true, but it sucked without Post Malone. I was like, we need Post here. Like, how are you going to do a song that has a feature and not have that person on the song live? But Olivia Rodrigo, after that, when she started playing All American Bitch, I was like, oh, hell yes. So I thought all the singles were great. Bad Idea, Vampire into Bad Idea, right? And then I think All American Bitch is kind of like the focus song or whatever on the record, but Get Him Back also being one of the bigger songs.
Yeah.
The record across the board was kind of shocking how much of a success it was.
Vampire is by far the most played song off that album, by the way. It's more than double Bad Idea, right? Which is number 2. All right, number 4. So Taylor Swift mostly didn't release new music in 2023, but there were some songs from the vault of 1989. I don't know if there were from the other album she did her version of. And of those, I'm going with Say Don't Go, which is maybe the song that I had stuck in my head the most throughout 2023, I would say. I would say it didn't go from my head. This is the second Taylor's version that has appeared in my top 10s over the last, I think, 3 years now. All right, number 3. Pegasus by Arlo Parks featuring Phoebe Bridgers. My Soft Machine came out last week.
You have 2 songs featuring 3 songs with Phoebe Bridgers on them in your top 10. Is that right?
You're assuming here, but yes.
Okay.
Yes. 2 songs featuring Phoebe Bridgers. That was my favorite listen during kind of the catch-up portion of this year in music and top 10 selection. Arlo Parks has an incredible voice. The songs have a great vibe. And then you put Phoebe Bridgers on top of that. It's hard to go wrong.
Yeah, and I think Arlo Parks' voice is kind of incomparable.
Yeah.
And definitely what separates them from other artists in a similar genre.
All right, number 2. Again, off of a soundtrack. Am I Dreaming by Metro Boomin, A$AP Rocky, and Royce. I am a sucker for any time strings are used in hip hop. I enjoyed this entire, like, the Spider-Man. This was Across the Spider-Verse, I believe, was the name of the part two of this one. The entire album was good, but this definitely was one of my favorite songs to listen to all year long after I started listening to it after going to the movie.
You watched the movie?
Yeah.
Uh, I thought Into the Spider-Verse, I was so blown away by. And Across the Spider-Verse, I was like, this is so incredible to look at. It feels like you're in a comic book watching it. I was like, there really is just, we got to get moving here. People,
With the
like,
storyline.
this was like, yeah, like it just, there were some moments that were so good, right? They're like when they go to India, that was incredible, right? And the Daniel Kaluuya's like punk Spider-Man
Oh
was
yeah.
so good. And then when they go to like the Spider-Man headquarters and Donald Glover's there, like there were a few moments that were so exceptional, but then there was so much time that just like goes on and on and on. And I went to it with a fucking 6-year-old. So I was just like, people, you gotta hurry up here. This is still a fucking comic book movie.
You needed this to be like a podcast you could listen to at 2x speed for parts of it.
I like went back and watched it on Netflix, and I was like, it is an exceptional movie to look at, and it was an exceptional movie to see in theaters, and the moments where it's good are so good.
Yeah. But look, that two-part movie isn't going to make itself. And also a big year, I feel like, for movie soundtracks between this and the Barbie soundtrack. I don't know if this is partially influenced by the fact that I went to more movies than ever before, or just because of the fact that they did a better job with that. All right, my number one song. You did correctly guess. Obviously, I had a song off the album by Boy Genius. Saw Boy Genius at the Gorge in August. It was an incredible experience. It was like I've seen other concerts where everybody is into it as that, but not with that many people, if that makes sense. Like there's been concerts with more people, and there's been concerts where people have been more into it, but never in the sweet spot of it's the Pareto optimization of the most people, the frontier of the most people, the most into it. At that concert, it was truly incredible. And the only question was which Boy Genius song I was going to pick. True Blue was the 1A here, could easily have made it. And then $20, also a finalist, was also on my list all year long, but eventually I went with Not Strong Enough.
Oh wow, you kind of went through all the songs.
I mean, that's three. There were
I
many
mean, but
more than that.
those are like the three songs. I feel
I
like.
mean, sure, yeah, for a reason.
Uh, no, I mean, honestly, this was a bigger year for Boy Genius than even I could have anticipated, and
I
knowing
never
knowing
imagined
that it
that Boy
was,
Genius was going to be on SNL.
I feel like that was reasonable, but like they set merch records at almost every place they were. It was kind of like not the anti Taylor Swift, but what I was saying about Taylor Swift not being like generally a lot of people agreeing she's probably not the best artist. Taylor Swift demands devotion, but also there's something about Taylor Swift where it's like, I'm just going because everybody else is going, right? The amount of people that I saw going to those shows or hear talk about going to those shows, just because it was a thing to do, as like, this is an important event. People do not go to Boy Genius shows because it's a thing to do. People are obsessed with the music in a way that like they are listening over and over and over again. They set merch records at basically every single venue they are at. They also, again, in opposition to Taylor Swift, had very low merch prices for what they were doing. It was a show, but it also was kind of an unassuming show in a lot of ways. And to me, the crazy thing about seeing Boy Genius is it doesn't have like I was seeing them at Red Rocks, right? And
Yeah,
I
I
was
was gonna
thinking about
say,
this.
yeah.
By the way, Red Rocks, I don't know if anybody's heard about this. Exceptional.
You know, I still in my head will only associate Red Rocks with one thing.
You too, live at Red Rocks. The DVD.
No,
No, what?
no, John Tesh live at
Oh,
Red Rocks,
John Tesh.
which was part of our Tesh anthology parody video that we created with the famous cousin Katie and our cousin Chris back in like 1998.
But so I was watching them. I was at Red Rocks. It was beautiful. Like me complimenting Red Rocks is like being like, yeah, I'm in on Zach Bryan. But like, um, Zach Bryan. Um, uh, me and his other 22 million monthly listeners or whatever.
22 million monthly listeners. Can't be wrong.
But they actually can be sometimes. I don't know if you've heard Greta Van Fleet, but all of them.
They have 22 million.
They're all in the subreddit. Every single one of them being like, I went back and listened to Led Zeppelin, ripping off Greta Van Fleet, one would say. But I was like, this is 4.7. Oh, harsh toke for Greta Van Fleet. This is so different than almost any really, really, really popular music, if that makes sense. What Boy Genius have done. Because there aren't really hooks. There aren't riffs. Like, there are melodies, but there's nothing that you could just casually like watch and latch on to. Like when I went to go, this is a crazy example, but like I remember when I was a kid going to go see Foreigner with Jan, and it's just like there's riffs and you're like, yeah, I can process all of this, right? You can go see it without knowing anything about it and be so completely in. Boy Genius is not like that at all. Boy Genius, like, you have to be part of it to be in. You can't go to a show like you can a Taylor Swift show and be like, yeah, I know the singles or whatever. Like, it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
For Boy Genius. And there are so many people who are all in on them on such a deep personal and emotional level where they didn't have to do, like, I thought the show was excellent. The show didn't even have to be excellent because people are so obsessed with them as human beings and performers that it's kind of wild. I mean, I feel like they're probably, for ultimately artists who I think two of them are still, three of them are signed individually to indie record labels, right? Collectively, Boy Genius is now signed to a major label, but all three of them individually are signed to indie record labels. And for artists who are on indie labels, this is one of the biggest impacts of basically any artist ever.
Yeah.
So it was a massive year. It was an awesome record that they put together. Being at the shows and just the culture around them is so supportive, so positive. There's not a lot of like posturing or whatever. People are just there because they fucking love it and they love music. And that to me is kind of what I was saying at the beginning of, this is a time period that this isn't a TikTok band, right? Like Boy Genius is not received, and I'm sure that they have successful songs on TikTok, but these are not 1 minute increment songs, right? And they still are able to do the thing, to sell out Red Rocks way in advance, to have that level of devotion, to have those merch records, to have the Grammy nominations. So I think what they did and what they built is one of the most important stories of this past year.
Yeah, I would agree. Clearly. All right, should we get into your version of top songs?
Okay, so little stipulation here. No artists that I work with are eligible for this list.
I also will not pick your artist for my top 10. I should have done that.
You kind of did.
That is true. Illuminati Hotties did help produce the record.
Right there at number 1. But so no artist that I work with would be eligible. I thought about just doing like not top, but just like a song from each artist I work with or whatever. Because people are like, I discovered these bands because of this list or whatever. And I'm like, well, shit, I should benefit from this too. But to not rank things or anything like that. So no artists that I work with are eligible, and tried to have more underground type artists who have not blown up in a massive way. And then of course, Zach Bryan. So at number 10, then the rankings are kind of just arbitrary. Number 10 is the song You're Faced by an artist called Wisp out of San Francisco. And the thing that has been like wildfire through both TikTok and then also the Twitterverse is shoegaze and slowcore becoming massive genres again.
I've heard this. I didn't know what to make of it.
This song is kind of like the intersection of all of those things. Wisp is basically like the most important artist. Massive has 3 songs out and riding that wave of the kids. You know, I was talking about how I was at a show in Nashville over the summer and the artist covered Change by Deftones. And it's like Deftones they're a heavier band, but also they're for being in basically lumped in with like new metal. Like they have a lot of shoegaze elements, and Deftones has become over time one of the most important artists from that like early 2000s like new metal world, and they're the ones that have lasted. And it really is because of this trend that is happening, which is a shocking one, and one where you have to be like, look, maybe it's not all bad.
Yeah.
At number 9, I have the song Problem Solver by Slim Dan. And this one actually came from Peltoncast listener Joe the Infragable. This artist Slim Dan actually had kind of a massive year in this fringe world of like production artists, songwriters. He has this crew that he has sort of like New York, LA, and the song's fucking sick the first time I heard it, and I listened to it over and over and over again. Very conversational. He had a song called Celebrity Lookalikes that kind of blew up in the Spotify world, but his whole crew is doing very, very well right now. At number 8, I have the song Show You Something by Buff Chick out of New Jersey. This was one of those tracks similar to like Night Shift to Me by Lucy Dacus is always the song that I come back to that's like starts slow and builds and builds and builds and builds. And this one for a young artist, Buff Chick, just like I listened to it a few times and it's one of those songs where I just like, I have to keep coming back to this and listen to it again and again and again. You have those moments where you're like, oh shit, when it hits that, hell yes. At number 7, I have the song Compete by Sugar Pit. Have you heard the song?
I don't know this one.
I picked this song just for the Pete Carroll fans. This
There
song,
you go. Can you make a hit album in the first quarter?
I mean, look, I came here to compete. The song, it's just like if it weren't for the Seahawks, like it's a dope song anyway. But the Pete Carroll element and thinking about that the entire time is like impossible. Impossible to ignore. It reminds me of, oh my god, there is a band called Art Brute.
Oh.
Like, do you remember Art Brute? Right after the Libertines were the most important band in the UK, Art Brute was the next most important band.
They played them
UK.
a ton on, John in the Morning. There was the one song about like we're gonna
formed
be
a band. We formed
yeah.
a band.
Yeah.
That record 2000 and looks 2020 on Spotify. I think it came out in like 2005. I want to say, Bang Bang Rock and Roll by Art Brute. Like that's what this kind of reminds me of, the Compete song.
Huh.
And
Interesting.
I also have used them as an example of when people were talking about bands being hot, where I'm like, it doesn't always last forever. Just be careful is my word of advice about all things. Yeah. But Art Brute, that record was like, I mean, they were the hottest rock band in the world. They were the number 1 UK band at the time. And like they were sort of the precursor to like Idols and Fontaines and bands like that. Anyway, I came here to compete. At number 6, a song called Beanie Baby Blues by Hannah Mars, out of Toronto, kind of like unassuming folk music that ends up being more dynamic the more times that you listen to it. This was one that I actually found on TikTok and was stoked about. At number 5, this is, again, it's gotten pretty popular now, a song called I Thought You'd Change by Hotline TNT. Hotline TNT, kind of like the band's band right now. I would say that they're like the number 1 next generation indie rock band. Like when I'm on calls talking with people, every single person is like, oh, that Hotline TNT record. Got best new music on Pitchfork. People are so excited about it. The lead singer, Will, is from Vancouver. I booked him in a band called Weed at Capitol Hill Block Party like 2013
That's
or
wild.
something like that.
So unlike Boots Riley, you didn't ruin his music career.
Yeah, spawn the whole thing. Maybe he had to quit the band. Had to start a new band because of it. But now based in New York, Hotline TNT, the record came out on Jack White's record label, Third Man. And they have had kind of the fastest rise of almost anybody sort of out of nowhere, similar to like Wednesday or somebody like that who were on this list a few years ago and ended up being a very, very large band. And number 4, the song Tour by Molly Velasquez, out of Nashville. There are 2 artists from Nashville here at the very end, actually. Just the amount of times that I'm looking around for songs and find something new and exciting and it's from Nashville is 98 out of 100 times. Like the scene that is happening, the indie scene in particular that is happening in Nashville is wild, almost in opposition to kind of the established country world that's happening there, like or that's there. Like the indie scene in Nashville is very very solid top to bottom, quickly growing, diverse, and there's so many amazing artists. I heard the song by Molly Velasquez. It was one of those songs where you look back and you're like, holy shit, what is this? And I came back to it over and over and over again. And she also kind of started blowing up in the Spotify world. It's one of those things where you're like, wow, I love this, but I didn't imagine anybody else would. I've started a theory about, not a theory, talking about how many times I'm wrong about things. The amount of times I've talked about bands where I was like, yeah, that band's sick, but they'll never have fans. And then they're like selling out 2,000 cap venues 1 year later or whatever. This was one of those times, not exactly that, but I was like, yeah, this track's awesome, but like, can it ever go beyond this? And now Molly Velasquez has had an awesome run on Spotify, especially.
I mean, I'm down for keeping a list of times that you're wrong.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it is uncountable how many times I've been wrong about music. I mean that's the thing, when you listen to a lot of music, you're wrong a lot of the time.
Yes.
And number three,
same when you do trade grades.
Is a song called "Delete It" by MS Paint. So this is one of those bands in that post Turnstile world. There's Gel, there's Scowl, there's MS Paint, hardcore bands that are now pop bands ultimately on the live side doing really really well. I think they have a song with Military Gun, who was on this list last year, I think. Military
Deleted
Gun
is with them.
Oh, that's the song with them. Okay.
Yes.
So Military Gun put out a record on Loma Vista. It was good, a good record. There's this world where things are now almost being labeled hardcore when they're not necessarily hardcore. And MS Pain, I was like, it's kind of like happy hardcore, right? It's not the most aggressive music. When you think about, like, when you listen to Knocked Loose and MS Paint, they're not the same genre necessarily, but there is this world where post Turnstile, everything wants to be hardcore. We're going to see that for shoegaze pretty soon. Like everything is going to be shoegaze in a year. People are going to be like any indie rock that is cool is going to be called shoegaze.
I like this because of I still use MS Paint.
Your feelings about MS Paint.
Yep.
And number two, the song "If Shit Fuck" by Meg Elsier. I could not tell you almost anything about her. One of those artists that I found the song and I listened to it, and immediately I was excited about it and listened to it over and over and over again. Also from Nashville, where random songs pop up and you're just like, oh my God, how did this happen? But a very established, considering this was, I think, their first ever song, the most like established visual world that I've seen around an artist in a very, very long time. This is somebody who just a few songs out, but I'm really excited to see continue to grow.
Yeah. I think 3 songs on Spotify.
3 songs now. And a number 1, my dude. Tourniquet by Zach Bryan. Literally, just like, I swear to God, this song. It was the way that you get into Zach Bryan is you're like, oh, I'd like Something in the Orange. It's haunting, right? Calling it a country song would be very generous, right? Or like the song with Casey Musgraves, right? You're like, I'll just listen to that. And all of a sudden you are deep into it. And I just kept listening and listening and listening. And I was like, God, that song just like gets in your head. And Tourniquet is probably the song that I've listened to outside of things I've worked on the most for this year. And there's a moment where Zach Bryan, right, his voice cracks. He gets a little aggressive and his voice cracks in this moment. And you're just like, how do you do this, Zach Bryan? How do you sound like you sound and have the vocal melodies that you have and get to this fucking line here right in the middle of the song? And it's just like kills me every time. I've had moments where I'll just like rewind it like 30 seconds, listen, 30 seconds back, listen again, listen again, listen again. This shit right here is like, this is music in 2023. Zach Bryan, I have no idea. I'm not going to boldly predict that he's going to be as successful or as big as Bruce Springsteen, but that is the only artist who I could reasonably compare Zach Bryan to at this point, or who I could reasonably post Springsteen be like, yeah, that's the perspective combined with the fame. And I think there are a lot of people who want to be Bruce Springsteen or have tried to be Bruce Springsteen, who've tried to have that mentality, right? Because he's the people's champ also. You know what I mean? Like you listen to a song like Heading South, and it's like a in opposition to the. You're smiling, you're smirking over there.
Oh, it has nothing to do with what you're saying
Okay.
specifically. It's the dumbest thing that I've just discovered.
You're like in opposition to people trying to hold an artist down in Oklahoma. Like he has the Springsteen mentality, but there are a lot of people who've done it in indie rock who want to be Bruce Springsteen. They've never been anywhere near as famous as Zach Bryan is. And if it takes the country genre to do that and to get there, then so be it. If people, that's what people want to label it. But this shit is excellent right now. So I underground or not, this song is the #1 song of the year. Had to do it to him.
Okay, so 2 follow-ups here.
Yeah.
The number one, all the stories about Zach Bryan say well stationed in Washington State. They never specify where he was stationed. I don't know that, because Lewis McCord obviously is not a Navy base. I don't know if we have any Navy bases outside of Bainbridge. So I think by definition,
I like that you're like Tony Reale. Like you feel like you have to correct this. I've said all sorts of wrong things on this podcast.
I was just very curious to look it up. And then like they all Jerry generically just say stationed in Washington State, but not where, which is a little suspicious to me. But also the most important thing, look, this podcast is nothing if not uninformed when it comes to country music. Luke Bryan is also a country music star.
No, I know. I knew that Luke Bryan was a country.
Oh, I thought you were just confusing the names.
No.
Luke Combs and Zach Bryan. Okay.
I was confusing the names, but I know that Luke Bryan is also
a separate. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my joke about Luke Bryan sounds like he's the coach of an SEC football team. He also sounds like a country star because he is one. So, well, that's it. The year in music.
There we go. I'll see you on November 22nd, 2024 for Zach Bryan at the Tacoma Dome.
Will not see me at the Tacoma Dome, even if I get into Zach Bryan.
November 22nd and 23rd, 2024. Mark your calendars. It's so funny how far out shows get announced. I think those Metallica shows are still coming, right?
I think it's 2024. Yeah, they got announced in like 2022. Do we have some exciting things to expect from your artists in 2024?
Absolutely. I can't talk about any of them.
Okay, great.
No, but I should say this has been an awesome 2023. I've definitely gotten to do things that I previously was never able to. Having an artist play at Red Rocks, being able to go in the underground tunnel at Red Rocks, like being able to walk up those stairs before doors. It is an incredible experience. Being at Pitchfork Music Festival this summer in Chicago, having an artist nominated for Grammys was definitely a first for me. It's been a pretty incredible year, and definitely want to thank every single artist I've been able and had the pleasure to work with this year. Done awesome things and so much cool stuff planned for next year for so many of them that I'm excited to share. But Choke Cherry, Christian Taylor, Eliza McClam, Enum Claw, Hannah Cole, Illuminati Hotties, Mercury, Michael Sayer, Pink Shift, and them. I guess the one thing that I can say is on New Year's Eve, them is going to be playing live from the Space Needle as part of New Year's at the Needle, 11:45 p.m. Should be very, very cool.
So it should be a lot of fun, yeah.
Back-to-back years with artists playing the Space Needle.
Shouts to nepotism.
It's like I might know a guy.
All right, on that.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.